Salut, bonjour, bienvenue. Here's a question for us all, really. Why does French vocabulary feel so overwhelming? I mean, when you have a book like this, look at the size of this, you're kind of not surprised to see that actually it does feel overwhelming. And it feels overwhelming to us all, really, if we think about it as like thousands and thousands, tens of thousands actually, of little words. Because actually, how many words are there? Well, if we think about the English dictionary, the size of the English dictionary at its absolute most expanded is 600,000 words. And the size of the French dictionary at its most expanded is 120, but it's sort of like everyday usage is about 60,000 words. Now, if you imagine those as little tiles, like a mosaic, a Roman mosaic or something, just imagine that if there was no sort of like unifying idea behind those, then, that would just be impossible, wouldn't it, for our brains to hold. So you would be forgiven for thinking, actually, my God, how on earth do you hold all of those different words in your mind? And luckily for us, there is actually a way to do that. But if you look at it just sort of like as let's say, tens of thousands of scattered little tiles that are individual words, then it's going to give us what a certain French linguist called Jacqueline Picoche called Pourquoi le vocabulaire français? Asked us the question, Pourquoi le vocabulaire français donne le vertige? So why does French vocabulary give us vertigo? And those are the reasons, aren't they? It can seem endless, and even if you start to organize it and categorize it by restaurant vocabulary, travel vocabulary, shopping vocabulary, food vocabulary, it doesn't really seem to make sense because, words, they don't really want to apply themselves to an individual situation. Occasionally, they're more used in one situation than the other. I think the only words that really do sit into categories, like really genuinely do, are highly, highly technical words, those that are associated maybe with a medical disorder, or a diagnosis, for example, or some kind of IT term, or some kind of scientific term, or something like that, or something that with the industry that you work in, a term that's really, really specific. And those aren't really going to be the French words that we're interested in learning, are they? So it never feels quite right, does it, when you see sort of like words in categories like restaurant, travel, shopping, food. But that's actually where you want to be able to use them. And also the other thing that comes out of that is you sort of like feel like, oh my goodness, I'm in a shop now. Where is that vocabulary that I wrote in that list, which was about a shop? And oh, today I'm in a restaurant. Now, was it the same as what, and it's too much. It's too much for us to think about. And then there's a sort of like the cumulative effect, as I said before, of all these numbers, of words, all these, let's imagine little tiles. So 20 words here off of a page or off of a list, off of a screen, 30 words there. And then maybe, if you're really diligent, you might have 100 new words or hundreds of new words by the end of a week. And what do you do with them? And over the years, I've been teaching French for a long time, but I suppose more importantly than that, I've taught over 10,000 hours of on live teaching, physically face to face or over Zoom. And one thing that I found is that it's really hard to find a way to organize this vocabulary in a way that makes sense. And what happens is you start off with a really neat little notebook, and then you say, well, that doesn't work. So I'm trying to push those into that list, but that doesn't work. And anyway, I can't remember anything about it. And I have to try to remember that page at the same time as I'm remembering that page and that page. And there simply isn't enough space. And what if I put post-its up and I've seen lots and lots of different methodologies. So my question to you would be, have you ever found a system for organising them that really works? And if you have, then I want to hear about it because it is a really, really difficult nut to crack. And actually, that's what 907 is about, is actually being a little bit more honest about, hey, this is a mess. This is a difficult thing to solve. And actually, if we sort of like allow ourselves to make this a little bit more organic and a bit more personal and a bit less sort of like constrained by categories, we might get somewhere with this. Just going back to, that mass, imagine that Roman mosaic of lots of, thousands, tens of thousands of tiny little tiles being representing our words. I mean, God, you could look at that mosaic, couldn't you, on the floor every day, and you wouldn't, unless you were somebody with an incredibly unusual way of remembering things, an unusual memory, you're probably not going to remember them. So problem isn't really memory, it's going to be structure. Because you remember a hell of a lot of stuff in your life. And just think of all those life memories that you have, all the lyrics to songs that you can remember, all the things that people have said to you over the years, all the feelings, how music takes you back to certain moments. You have got a fantastic system. You can remember things, but vocabulary is not working, is it? And it's because the structure isn't there if we just think of it as a collection of those mosaic tiles. But there is good news. Une bonne nouvelle is that actually in French, and I expect this is true of other languages, but the area that I specialise in is French, is that vocabulary has got a hidden structure in French. And with what 907 is for you to help for you to discover that structure one word at a time. And it's really very, very exciting. So what we find is that some words appear everywhere, and we call that there's a bit of a bit of jargon maybe, or a glossary of terms that I like to refer back to all the time, based on research, by the way, that was done by Jacqueline Picoche, and I'm going to reference her a lot because that's where this thinking comes from. She's a French linguist who did 50 years research into vocabulary. That's what she dedicated her whole life to. And she came up with these terms, so I'm reusing them. So if a word comes up everywhere in French, then we will call that word a word of haute fréquence, high frequency. And we'll find that other words appear rarely, and we're not interested in those. We'll also find actually that some words, of haute fréquence actually attract certain friends, certain groups of words around them, and it's not by chance as well. But that's another step further on. And also that what we've also found in French is that a really small group of words does an astonishing amount of work. And that's what we call rendement. And rendement is sort of like yield, is sort of like giving things back, because the verb rendre, if you happen to know, it means to give back. So at the French room, challenge 907, well, 907 actually, because challenge 907 is something that I'd like to offer you to get involved in. But 907 as a concept helps you notice these words and mind their value one by one, because we need to go through them one by one, because we want to avoid this whole sort of like situation of like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of ideas, and not really knowing which ones are the most important to hold on to. So it helps you sort of like structure and decide, where to give your attention. And what you'll find by taking these steps through 907 with me at the French room, front room, is that little by little a hidden structure starts to appear behind the language, and that's really, really exciting. When you start to feel that structure, the words start to have meaning and shape and size and smell, and believe me, there's an awful lot of actual physical structure to words, and then funny enough they start to come back to you just when you need them most when you're speaking. And contrast that then with what most of us were taught at school, which is, you had I don't know about you, but I had a vocab book and I'd learn vocabulary and lists, new word, new word, new word, new word. And I'd have about as much emotional investment and understanding of each of those words that I was writing down as if it were new word, new word, new word, new word. And it looks like progress on the page, but when it comes to speaking, you can't find those words, understandably, because you haven't got a relationship with them. So the question that I ask you to ask yourself repeatedly, actually, when you do 907 with me, is how can I reuse this word? When I introduce you a new word, you'll find that, it's a very useful word, and you might say, well, actually, how can I reuse it? And that's absolutely the right question to ask. And also, what do I already know about this word? Because you'll always be building off of what you already know. So it's a bit of a stark choice, really. From here, you can follow one of two paths, one direction or the other. Path one is collect more and more words, or, if you come back to mind the analogy, of the Roman mosaic floor, more and more tiles and make it look more and more pretty and look like progress on the face of it. Or you can take one powerful word chosen by me very, very carefully at a time and see where it takes you, see how far it stretches you. And of course, the second path is the one that I want you to take, because that is the path that 907 takes. Merci d'avoir écouté et puis bah à la prochaine. Merci beaucoup. Au revoir. Au revoir.